Hello, this is Dr. Jack Wolfson, board-certified cardiologist, and welcome to another episode of the Healthy Heart Show. And today, I'm very excited because I'm going to be talking to Dr. Terry Wahls. If you don't know Dr. Terry Wahls, I don't know where you've been because she is all over the place. She is all over social media, the internet, and of course, any kind of holistic health conference. She is right there front and center, and for good reason, because she is a medical doctor who found out the truth, if you will, that modern medicine was not going to do much for her condition, if anything at all, and she was going to go after the root cause. And because of that, and she was able to help herself and cure herself, and she'll tell you that story, and wrote, best-selling books, etc., because of her ability, to do that and to get outside of the medical matrix. So welcome, Dr. Wahls, to the Healthy Heart Show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
I've been a big fan of yours for a long time because you're another medical doctor who once again has just opted out of the mainstream medical system because things were not successful. And maybe tell me a little bit about your medical training, kind of where
Sure.
you came from, and then tell me how much education you had on nutrition and lifestyle and the things that you talk about in your book. How much did you learn in your medical training that applied to your book?
So I'm an internal medicine doc. I trained traditionally, did a year of OB-GYN, then 3 years of internal medicine. Throughout all of that, I received no lectures on nutrition, and nobody was talking about diet and lifestyle. Fat was the evil thing. We're all supposed to do a low-fat diet, and I was trained to be very skeptical of special diets, skeptical of supplements, skeptical of complementary alternative medicine. And that's what I taught my residents to be. I taught them to be very, very skeptical. And then, God works in mysterious ways. I was diagnosed with relapsing remitting multiple sclerosis in 2000 because I had problems with my left leg. And I'd had a history of visual dimming in my left eye 13 years earlier. And so, I knew I wanted to treat my disease very aggressively. So I sought out the best center I could find, which was the Cleveland Clinic, and took the newest drugs. But I continued to decline despite that.
It's amazing, because you go to the Cleveland Clinic and I tell the story about my father, who was an excellent cardiologist, and he came down with this strange neurologic disease similar to Parkinson's called progressive supranuclear palsy. And we take him to the Mayo Clinic eventually, where he gets the official label, right? Because us medical doctors are really good at labels, right? This person has MS, and this person has cancer, and this person has a brain disease, has Parkinson's, and all these different categories we put people into. So they label him with PSP, and they say that there's no treatment for him. They have no idea why he has it. And this is at the Cleveland Clinic. At the Mayo Clinic, and you go to the Cleveland Clinic. And this is the answers that the majority of people are getting, and they're not getting answers. They're not getting better.
Yeah, we're really good now at figuring out that disease is because of altered biochemistry. Chemistry is not happening properly, and so we're going to fix that chemistry with drugs. The sad thing is, we'd spend all this money researching how diet and lifestyle and environment affects how we run the chemistry of life, we'd be so much further along in understanding how to help our patients become well. Now, I would, because even though I took the best drugs from the best people, I had 7 years of steady decline and was in a tilt recline wheelchair, unable to sit up, having refractory pain that was more and more difficult to manage. That's when I went back to reading the basic science myself, and we began experimenting based on what I was reading. And I was reading, a lot of nutrition studies, a lot of supplement studies, and I'd figure out a supplement cocktail that helped my fatigue a little bit, slowed the speed of my decline, so I was grateful. But, that summer of 2007, I discovered the Institute for Functional Medicine, took their course on neuroprotection, had a longer list of supplements. But then I had this really big aha moments, like, what if I redesign my diet using what I learned from these supplements, but I reshaped how I ate in a very specific way. And when I did that, it was remarkable how quickly things began to change.
And people may ask why would Jack Wolfson, and this is the Healthy Heart Show, why would he have, Dr. Terry Wahls on? And the answer is, quite obvious, because as we've talked about already, the causes of all these different diseases, the causes of all these different labels that the medical doctors give, they're all fundamental, and it is nutrition and it's lifestyle. And like you said, we learn about none of this in medical school. We never talk about nutrition. We never talk about sleep. We never talk about sunshine. We never talk about physical activity. We talk about pharmaceuticals and surgeries and CT scans and MRIs. I mean, right? Isn't that all we learned?
And we learn a lot about the New England Journal of Medicine and standards of care, levels of evidence, is it class A, class B, class C? We learn all of that, but we didn't learn and we learned a lot about disease. We learned very little about health. We learned very little about what were the requirements for optimal functioning of my biochemistry, optimal functioning of my cellular physiology. And so, the beauty of getting so desperately ill was that, I finally had to come to terms with the fact that I had a progressive illness that drugs was not going to resolve. And that got me to beginning to think, what else could I do? And that got me to reading the science and, ultimately beginning to experiment in a very intentional way, trying to optimize the physiology for my cells based on everything that I could read about, again, using science to design a very specific diet to reduce the inflammation, reduce the oxidative stress, improve cellular physiology. And, Jack, it was really quite remarkable. So in October of 2007, I can't sit up. I struggle to walk 10 feet. I have trigeminal neuralgia that is mostly on, so very, very difficult. I'm beginning to have brain fog. I'm exhausted by 10 in the morning. In January, I have to go start seeing patients in a traumatic brain injury clinic that my chief of staff had sent me to. And I knew he had done that primarily to force me to face medical retirement, because the VA and the university were tired of redesigning my job, which they had done for about 7 years. And of course, I was quite grateful they had done that. But it was and that's when I discovered the Institute for Functional Medicine. I was reshaping my diet. And so in December, I really had reorganized my eating plan. In January, I go off to clinic, the traumatic brain injury clinic, and I think, okay, I'm really not going to be able to do this, and I'm going to have to finally apply for disability. But to my amazement, at the end of that first week in clinic, I was like, well, this really wasn't too bad. And by the end of February, I do something really remarkable. I use my cane to walk down to mail a letter. And so I'm walking in the hospital for the first time, in 4 years. And then my pain has melted away. My mental clarity is just continues to improve. My fatigue is gone. And 9 months later, I get on my bike and I bike around the block the first time in 6 years. I'm crying, my kids are crying, my wife's crying. And that's when I'm like, okay, clearly the conventional understanding of secondary progressive MS is wrong. That functions once lost, which I'd been told would be gone forever, they were all coming back. So who knew? It's like, okay, we don't really know how much recovery might be possible. And so in the meantime, I'm beginning to change how I'm practicing primary care. In my traumatic brain injury clinic, I'm talking to my patients that, yep, you got a traumatic brain injury, and yes, there's a lot we can do for you. We can teach you about nutrition. We're going to teach you how to do stress-reducing activities. You're going to get a step counter. You're going to start walking every day. And you could tell who I saw, because the people I saw started getting better. They were likely to still be employed when they came back 6 months later. They were likely to still be romantically involved with the same person 6 months later. And in my primary care clinics, I started talking less and less about drugs and more about food, and more and more.
Yeah. Let me ask you this: and what did your colleagues think about this? Where you're kind of you're on your soapbox now, and you're talking about causation, you're talking about nutrition. What I know what my colleagues thought about me. What did yours think about you?
Next thing I know, I have there were two things that happened in sort of parallel. The first thing, my chief of staff called me and said, "Okay, Terry, what's going on? People are upset." I had several complaints filed, so I had to go down and explain to him what I was doing. And I took my papers down, and he said, "Okay." And he ultimately became a big fan. I took a box with 85 different papers explaining what I was doing and why. My chair of medicine over at the university talked with me, and he said he was so impressed with what I was doing. He gave me the job of getting a case report written up. But he also did something that was also really important. He had me speak with Nicole Knisley, who made it very clear that I had to be very careful how I documented this in the clinical record and how I spoke about it in public, so that I was not overstating my case. So I was very careful that I was not treating any disease state with my radical things known as vegetables and B vitamins and fish oil, but rather I was improving cellular function, in that I couldn't necessarily predict what the response would be, but it was quite possible, if physiology improved, that blood pressure would improve, blood sugars would improve, and that we may be having to adjust their medications downward. And so once I learned how to talk in the appropriately FDA-approved language about improved physiology, and that as a potential side effect would have to watch your blood pressure and your blood sugars closely and adjust medications, so you wouldn't have adverse effects from excessive dose of meds, then my colleagues were comfortable with what I was doing, and things were fine. But I had to learn how to speak very carefully, so that my colleagues were not alarmed that I was treating their disease states, but I was simply trying to improve wellness. That was a little bit of a learning curve for me, and I certainly did get a lot of pushback at first.
Yeah, you and I are definitely, brother and sister from another mother, that's for sure. Because obviously I went through so many of the same trials and tribulations. I was with the biggest group in the state of Arizona, private practice, cardiology, at the top of the cardiology game, certainly financially. And I was one of the, Phoenix, Arizona's top doctors in 2011 in their magazine there. And, but really just, I guess I wasn't very diplomatic, because I would stand up on my soapbox and I'd be talking about all this stuff at the nurse's station. And I'd be, they would be calling up the medical practice and our managing partner and yelling and screaming at him. And all the referring doctors were all pissed off that I was talking about nutrition and taking people off of statins and other pharmaceuticals.
Oh, yeah.
But you know what, to me, your book is so well referenced, and you talk about your 85 studies that you brought in, and now it's probably like 8,500 studies. And my book has over 300 references. It's all there in the medical literature. Why are the medical doctors not reading it?
Well, it's very hard to stay current. You learned all that stuff during medical school and residency, and then you're in practice, and you're just trying to get through your day and get home to your kids. So unfortunately, medicine advances sort of one funeral or one retirement at a time. What I do find exciting, though, is that as our understanding of the microbiome has exploded, as understanding of epigenetics has exploded, people can begin to understand the mechanisms of how diet and lifestyle are shifting the levels of inflammation, the levels of oxidative stress, and how we're running our biochemistry. And when I wrote my book, Most of the neurologists around the country thought diet had nothing to do with MS or disease activity, and people should eat just what they wanted. But that has begun to shift. There are now multiple studies going on of diet in the study of MS, ketogenic studies, low glycemic index studies, Mediterranean diet studies, paleo diet, a low saturated fat diet. So, people are beginning to finally admit, like, yes, diet quality matters. And, the MS Society has finally created educational handouts, both for practicing physicians and for patients, saying that diet quality matters. And more research is needed, but here are some popular diets, and here's the science behind them, and the potential benefits and the potential downsides of these diets. So we're definitely making headway.
The whole concept of diet is really amazing because, you got your dog there in front of you, and dogs are so healing, so beneficial on so many different levels, even like from an infrared energy, the energy given off by your dog to you.
Yes.
And your dog is tremendous. How come we don't have to teach a dog what to eat? If we put a dog into the wild, they would just be, they would eat other animals. They would eat berries, and they would eat the grass. I mean, they would be hunter-gatherers. Why have we as humans missed the boat on that? Why do we say that the hunter-gatherer diet is not the best diet?
It's political, economical. We've created a food industry that has been allowed to design food for maximal profit. So they create products, add additives to drive overconsumption, and will overconsume their product, increase their profits, and there's no penalty for them if there's long-term health adverse consequences to us. And I think this is unfortunately the natural consequence of our economic system. It's unfortunate, but I think it's reality. I know a lot of people have criticized that there's no one hunter-gatherer diet, so therefore the paleo diet has to be wrong. And it's just like, no. Our mitochondria and our physiology is very adaptable. That's why humans have, across the globe, we've adapted to many different climates, and we can survive on a high-fat diet or a high-protein diet or a high-carb diet. And there are many ways to thrive. But the things that we do know that clearly wreck our health are a lot of processed foods, a lot of sugar, a lot of food additives, a lot of emulsifiers, a lot of white flour. Clearly, that's terrible for us. And you can have debate as to whether a ketogenic diet is better or a lower protein, higher fat diet, or a low glycemic diet, high vegetable Mediterranean diet. There's a lot of debate there, but.
So as far as the laboratory testing, because the medical doctors know that inflammation is bad. They know that oxidative stress is bad. They just don't understand what creates inflammation and oxidative stress. And to them, obviously in the cardiology world, if there's inflammation, oxidative stress, it's a sign that the person needs statin drugs. They need an aspirin. They need their ACE inhibitor, their blood pressure drugs. That's what their answer is. But we like to go after causation. And I'm certainly not the first person that said leaky gut, leaky brain. But I'm sure you would agree. Obviously, the penetration of the blood-brain barrier and all the immune activation, autoimmune activation against brain tissue leads to symptoms of MS and Parkinson's, and my father with PSP.
Yeah, inflammation, to me, is a sign of inadequate vegetable intake, inadequate greens, inadequate color, inadequate sulfur, inadequate physical activity, inadequate social contact, inadequate purpose, inadequate bonding, inadequate sleep. Fix all of those things, and they'll probably need a lot fewer prescription medications.
You didn't mention a deficiency of seafood. Tell me the importance of seafood for brain health.
Well, what you want to do is get omega-3 fats. So if you're along the coast, our ancestors would have had plenty of fish. If you were inland, and I'm here in Iowa, so we're quite inland, you would have been getting that from wild venison, buffalo. You probably would have had some wild fish as well. So certainly you want to have plenty of omega-3 fats, and you can get that from wild fish. You could get that from the yolks of pastured chickens. You could get that from grass-fed meat.
Well, I mean, I kind of had like this few moment because I thought you were going to say that over in Iowa you were going to get the omega-3s from corn.
No.
Or my home state of Illinois, that where people think that health comes from soybeans. So,
unfortunately, in Iowa and Illinois, most of our soybeans and corn are genetically modified. So that's another separate issue, and that's an experiment that I'd rather not be part of. Most of those genetically modified organisms have been modified to tolerate a high dose of glyphosate, which is a weed killer to allow for a more efficient harvest of those crops and growing of those crops. But it also has a huge disruption to my microbiome and the microbiome of the animals that are fed those genetically modified soybeans and corn.
I totally agree with, and I did. I'm sure we have the mutual friend in Stephanie Seneff,
yes.
And I've interviewed her for the podcast as well, and it's such eye-opening material for people, and even there's genetically modified potatoes right now. It's insane.
And for a lot of folks who are getting their supplements, they may not realize that many of the supplements are manufactured using genetically modified bacteria. So you have to be very thoughtful as you think about food and you think about supplements, that these GMOs are so pervasive.
Well, I think, and as you're a big proponent of, and by the way, as far as diet is concerned, you can go to Terry Wahls, Terry Wahls, WAHLS.com/diet. And she's got a simple one page there for you, which is basically going to contain all the foods you need. And we can do this with diet. I mean, supplements obviously help to supplement the healthy lifestyle, and you got to know your companies. That's for sure. But you can't supplement your way to health. You can't eat fast food, cookies and cupcakes, and drink alcohol every night and expect that your supplements are going to save you, because they're not, right?
Correct. They will not. They will absolutely not save you.
Okay. MS and pretty much all diseases, the farther you are away from the equator, the higher your risk of. The lower your levels of vitamin D, the higher the risk of everything, including multiple sclerosis. But the answer is not vitamin D supplementation. To me, the answer is the sun. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And unfortunately, our dermatology colleagues have convinced people to slather their skin with sunblock so that they don't get a sunburn, to reduce the risk of skin cancer. But when you do that, then you cannot make vitamin D. So you'll be vitamin D deficient, and that has a huge impact on gene expression in your inflammation levels as well.
You mentioned dermatologists, and it's like I automatically cringe. I feel so sick whenever I hear that term, dermatologist, and just how they vilified the sun, and how these idiots on television tell people to stay away from the sun. I'm sure you experience this as well, Terry, and I know you're a mother and you have children, and I mean, when you go to the beach and you see these parents that are slathering on the chemical toxins on their children, I just want to grab them and run away, right? I mean, do you feel the same way? You want to grab those children and run?
You look at the epidemic of learning disorders, of behavior problems, of social anxiety in children. It's tied to the inadequate vegetable intake, inadequate sunlight, inadequate physical activity, inadequate face-to-face human contact. And the sunblock is a big part of it. The inadequate vitamin D, a big part of it. And I see these increasing levels of anger and rage in our society, increasing levels of violence in our society. These are lifestyle at the root cause. These are lifestyle problems. These are diet, sunshine, physical activity, social bonding.
I don't know, doctor. I've got like that same kind of rage at times when I just see what's going on in society, and I eat a great diet and I get tons of sunshine and sleep, and I still have that rage. And I've only said my rage sometimes is trumped by my wife. And I often say from the stage that my wife, Dr. Heather, who's a doctor of chiropractic, who got me to become all natural and pulled me out of the medical matrix. I always say she's about this close from becoming the Incredible Hulk. She's so angry by what's happening to our children. And she's so passionate about the children and about the animals. Tell me about the importance of sleep as it relates to MS and as it relates to overall health and wellness.
As we sleep at night, so that's when my brain consolidates memory. It's also very importantly when my brain will remove toxins and amyloid. So getting deep sleep, very, very important. And the fact that we're sleeping about 1 hour, 60, I think 75 minutes less now than we did 75 years ago. So that's huge. We have difficulty with blue lights coming because of the computer, the phone, television. So that gives signals to my retina that confuse the time sensing aspects of my brain. So my hormones are now out of sync. So sleep, very, very important. Much easier to sleep if I minimize the screen time at night, get outside, get sunlight during the day. So I want to talk about that.
Yeah, and let me ask you about this. So what about, let's talk about mold. What about mold exposure, chronic mold and mold in houses as it relates to autoimmune disease?
This will, again, there's some amount of genetic vulnerability. Do you have enzymes that can efficiently clear mold toxins from your bloodstream, or are you less efficient at doing that? And the more hits that you have in terms of your ability to detoxify, the more vulnerable you will be to the accumulation of mold toxins. So as people, address the overall matrix, improve their sleep, improve the quality of their diet, improve their social bonding, they can handle mold better. Now, you may have gotten yourself such a large dose of mold spores, mold toxins, that you've become very, very ill with an autoimmune-like symptoms, with severe fatigue, severe headache, and what looks like Lyme's disease or MS. And you may require a very intensive intervention program so you can recover from that. And then once you've recovered, then you can more easily maintain good health.
Fantastic.
The reason we become ill with mold has to do with the lifestyle tipping us over, that the poor diet, the poor sleep, the inadequate vitamin D, that adds to greater compromise in our ability to clear those mold toxins.
Got it. Yeah, certainly I agree. What are your thoughts on, in my category, statin drugs and brain health, and specifically autoimmune brain disease, dementia, Parkinson's, PSP? My father was on statin drugs. Statin drugs diminish dolichol, which is a steroid-like hormone concentrated in the substantia nigra, and statins and alcohol reduce that. My father drank too much and he took statin drugs like any good cardiologist does. What do you think about statins and the brain?
I remember early on when we were reviewing the papers about statins and their dramatic impact at lowering heart attacks. But every time we reviewed the papers, when I was a resident, we kept saying, but what about this higher rate of homicide and suicide? And we'd say, well, it can't be real. Well, it turns out that there is a real cognitive impact. And that there is deleterious impact on the brain, in that these higher rates of suicide and homicide are significant, and higher rates of diabetes are significant. So you may have an impact on lower rates of acute cardiac events, but is there really a favorable impact on all-cause mortality? And furthermore, the problem has to do with inadequate vegetable intake. The problem has to do with high levels of inflammation because of poor diet and lifestyle. We don't need to be giving people statins. We should be addressing that by addressing the root cause, which is poor diet quality, inadequate physical activity, inadequate social bonding.
I agree with you 1,000%. This is so easy having the conversation with you because we totally agree with each other. Although I do have a question. You mentioned before that you think that low saturated fat diet, is saturated fat a problem in your mind?
No. Although, yeah, I will tell. So I'm mindful that some folks are very, very concerned about saturated fat, and they really want to follow a low fat diet. And so my response there is use a lot of olive oil. Your brain is dependent on fat to make myelin. Your myelin and the cell membranes are dependent on cholesterol, saturated fat, omega-6 fat in nuts and seeds, omega-3 fat in grass-fed meat, wild fish, and you need all those fats. If you go on a very, very low-fat diet, you're putting a lot of strain on your myelin. You're also putting a lot of strain on your ability to make vitamin D, which we all need, and you're putting a lot of strain on your ability to make sex steroids. And you need testosterone. I need a tiny amount of testosterone, and I need a lot of estrogen. Yeah, I don't think you need any estrogen, but we can't make those things without cholesterol and saturated fat. So I am not a fan of low saturated fat diets.
Yeah, I certainly agree. And these super low fat people, the Caldwell Esselsons, the engine number 2 guy, the firefighter, the John McDougals, the Joel Furmans. I mean, it's just, those guys are just, they're experimenting on people. It's just not our physiologic diet to be that low fat. I mean, breast milk from a mother to a baby or to an animal to its baby is loaded with fat, loaded with cholesterol. And these people continue to vilify it. And what happens is theoretically, you can lower your risk of cardiovascular disease, but it's starvation. So the body will start digesting itself and pulling all the good nutrients from the brain. And like you said, the homicides, the suicides, and the original statin literature from the PROSPER trial, from AFCAPS, TEXCAPS, there was no evidence of benefit for overall mortality. In fact, there was a slightly higher incidence of dying in the drug group from those that were taking the statin drugs. So
I'd also add in, if you look at all-cause mortality in the quintiles, people with the highest quintile for their blood cholesterol have the lowest all-cause mortality, lowest risk of infection, lowest risk of cancer, lowest risk of dementia.
Yeah, lowest risk of brain disease. Yeah, for sure. I mean, those people that recommend that, it's an absolute starvation diet. And
so my response, because I want to maintain relationships with my cardiology colleagues here, is like, okay, if the person has their cholesterol shoot up on a ketogenic diet that's using MCT oils, fine. We'll take them off the MCT oil. I'll have them use olive oil, and I'll have the person eat once a day. Or the other option we can go down, still use a heavy olive oil diet and have them do a periodic fast. And depending on the individual, they can decide how long they want that periodic fast to be. And I'll be actually, I'm in the midst of doing this right now, rewriting my book, The Wahls Protocol. So I'll be talking a lot more about periodic fasts and how to modify a ketogenic diet to keep your cardiologist from being so stressed out in terms of they're wanting you to restrict fat. I don't want people to restrict fat. If you have a cardiologist who's very concerned, use olive oil, use lots of olive oil, and their cardiologists are usually very happy with that. You can't go on a low fat. That's going to wreck your brain.
Yeah, I think it would be hard to argue the benefits you say that olive oil is dangerous given the Mediterranean diet,
Right.
data. I mean, it's impossible to argue with the value of olive oil.
And in most of these studies that have used olive oils, they've had to stop them early because of the striking benefits from taking 1 to 2 tablespoons of olive oil on top of as a supplement. So I think that's a very, very safe intervention.
I think also, Doc, is that when people say that they're on a ketogenic diet or they go on paleo and their cholesterol levels go up, I typically say, so what? You know, you follow your ancestral diet and your levels will go to where they need to go. But then I wanted them to take it one step further, because the cardiologists are not doing this. They're not fractionating the lipids very often. They're not looking at ApoB, ApoA ratios. They're not looking at the inflammation. Oh, my total cholesterol went from 180 to 230. Maybe that's a good thing if your ratio is still preserved, which the literature says it does, and your inflammation goes down.
And your HDL went up.
Patient wins.
In particle size, that makes all the favorable changes, then that's perfectly fine. If there are some folks who use coconut milk, coconut oil, MCT oil, and the cholesterol suddenly goes from 200 to 350, that's the person like, okay, that's fine. Just go off the coconut oil and we'll just use olive oil.
And I think also is that, you know, those people, yeah, they tend, you know, and for those people, I tend to push them more towards the whole food. Okay, maybe the added oils for you in particular are not the best. And let's just go with eating olives, eating the coconut itself, eating the avocado, but in no way should we ever put those people to low fat. I agree with you. That is an absolute devastating idea. What, as far as supplements are concerned, what are maybe 2 or 3 of your favorite supplements?
So things I have people measure your vitamin D level, get that fixed, measure your homocysteine level, and then I would probably get a folate and a B12, and then you can titrate your B vitamins to take care of your homocysteine. Digestive enzymes can help make sure that you are digesting your proteins fully, so that, because if your proteins are completely digested, you're less likely to have these proteins get over into your bloodstream with a leaky gut, and you'll have less food sensitivity issues. So those are the 3 big categories that I would think about. I'm fond of cod liver oil because you'll get some vitamin A, retinol, some vitamin D, and the EPA. DHA, the omega-3s there as well.
What are your thoughts on probiotic supplementation?
You know, I think probiotic supplementation, we really don't know, but I'm very, very fond of eating fermented foods and a wide variety of fermented foods. I'm very fond of having a lot of fiber in your diet. And I think everyone should do the daily microbiome test, known as having a bowel movement, standing up, turning around, and examining it, and deciding, are you pooping rocks, logs, snakes, pudding, or tea? If you've got pudding or tea, you need less fiber. If you have snakes, it's perfect. If you have easily passed logs, that's okay. If you have rocks, you need more fiber.
More for sure, more fiber. And are you one of these people who pushes people to drink a lot of water? You big one of these, drink half your body weight in ounces daily?
You know, I think we should drink according to our thirst and our appetite, and eat according to our appetite. I don't think my ancestors weighed themselves. They drank when they were thirsty, and they ate when they were hungry. And I would also make the observation, food wasn't readily available. You had to do a lot of work to get it, and you would practically not have any. And that's probably a huge... it's a hormetic stress to periodically be thirsty and to periodically be hungry.
And I think, and you also mentioned it before as far as fasting, and your new book is going to contain some additional information about fasting and the latest and greatest on fasting.
Yes, yes. We're working on that.
Love that.
Plus, I'll be able to update our research that's come out. So that's very exciting.
Coffee, yay or nay?
You know, as long as you can sleep well at night, coffee's fine. There are plenty of studies that have shown consuming coffee lowers the risk of cancer, heart attack, dementia. I I think, I can't remember right now. I think a couple cups a day are also protective for autoimmunity as well. So coffee is a protective food. If you are a slow metabolizer, so it keeps you awake at night, then you have to either limit it to a smaller dose in the morning, and some folks won't be able to tolerate it at all. I'm easily activated. If I have coffee, I can't sleep. So I'll drink tea, but no coffee.
Yeah, the antioxidants in coffee, especially when it's a quality coffee, I think are so tremendous and beneficial. And I'm not just saying that because I love to drink coffee. My father was a coffee drinker, and back then, right, I was in Chicago, and it was the big tin of Folgers and Maxwell House, or maybe even, God forbid, instant coffee, that kind of poison. But I think the ability now to go out and get a good organic variety, something that is tested low for mold. My favorite coffee is Purity coffee, and just a tremendous high source of antioxidants to combat all that free radical damage.
Yeah, coffee, organic cocoa, wonderfully good for you.
Fantastic. So when does the new book come out?
It should be spring of 2020. So we have to turn in our manuscript at the end of February. So I am in the midst of writing right now. So it's lots of fun. It's lots of fun to review and update. We spent the last several months going through the literature and trying to decide what to include, what not to include.
Fantastic. All right. terrywalls.com/diet is where you're going to get your free download about the just one page. You put it up on the refrigerator, all the stuff that Dr. Wahls recommends as far as food is concerned. She's all organic. She's all about eating good quality, high fats. She loves her seafood and her sunshine. Probably not too much sunshine in Iowa this time of year. Am I correct?
Well, there's sun, but it's sort of low in the horizon, so you can't make much of a tan. But you still go outside, still enjoy. And Teddy and I took a lovely walk. But we did have a huge snowstorm yesterday, so we had about a foot of snow on the ground.
Love it. Love it. Oh, you're such a good dog owner. Your dog is so lucky getting a whole massage for the last hour. How lucky is your doggie?
The social bonding from our pets, very important. It's a very helpful thing.
No doubt. I mean, a cardiovascular risk. I wrote a whole chapter in my book called One Nation Under Prozac, and the mental health issues of society we're not deficient in Prozac, but social isolation is such a horrible thing, and having a pet is so beneficial for that. So, as you know, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Jack Wolfson, the paleocardiologist. Another episode of the Healthy Heart Show with Dr. Terry Wahls. Check out her website and stay tuned for her new book. I won't be out for a little while, but I'll be a huge promoter of that. Make sure everybody in my tribe and my space knows about it. So thank you again, Dr. Wahls, for being on the show.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time on the Healthy Heart Show.